Happy Monday, everyone. Welcome to October's Employment First Topics and Tactics. We are thrilled to have you with us this morning. Thank you for sharing your time. If you're not familiar with Employment First Topics and Tactics, this is our monthly webinar series that seeks to support job seekers, employment professionals, parents, partners, anyone interested with tools and strategies to advance employment first principles across Arizona. I believe we've got our live captioning available this morning. If you need support with anything accessibility wise, please post a note in the chat. We want to ensure that you have full access to all of our content this morning. I will also say to presenters and attendees, when you're talking, please try not to speak too quickly. That can hinder the accessibility process for folks. So we just want to make sure we're not going too fast, which I tend to do. So I have to make an effort. Before we begin this morning, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge the University of Arizona is located on land and territories of Indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being home to the O'odham and the Yaqui. We are grateful to be on this land, and we pay our respects to the elders past and present. You have to always be mindful. I also want to acknowledge Arizona Vocational Rehabilitation, or VR. This monthly series is funded by Arizona VR, and our overall initiative is funded by VR, and we are promoting competitive integrated employment for all Arizonans, including those with disabilities. So please make sure you register today for future sessions. And I want to have another note before we begin. As we celebrate the 80th, I can't believe it, it's amazing, anniversary of National Disability Employment Awareness Month. The Employment First team has some resources for you on our webpage. When I'm done babbling, I'll throw that in the chat unless somebody else is able to do it before me, but that's okay. But we've got some downloadable Zoom backgrounds if you like what you see behind me, and social media posts. We really want you all to celebrate this important time of year. Of course, those of us in the industry celebrate disability employment every day, all year long. But this is our time to help make others aware as well. So use the resources we've got and spread the word. But with that, I'm ready to get us kicked off for today's session. We are so excited. We appreciate that you share your valuable time with us, and that you join us every month to learn. Those of you who are with us regularly know we've been giving you opportunities to tell us what you need, and overwhelmingly, everyone's telling us we need to understand employer engagement and we need to improve our strategies around employer engagement. So that's what we've got for you this month. I lost my place in what I was looking at. Sorry. So today I am so thrilled to introduce my fairly new friend, but some of you probably know him well, Todd Weber with Direct Advocacy and Resource Center. Todd has over 25 years of entrepreneurial business experience. He's the father of identical twins who have a visual disability. In 2016, he made a career change from business development to pursue his true passion of working with individuals with disabilities. He has assisted the world's largest online retailer to establish a program that promoted inclusion in their workforce by hiring people with disabilities. He's also worked as a job developer to assist folks to obtain competitive and customized employment. And in his current role at Direct, he's setting an amazing example of inclusive employer engagement. Today, Todd is here with a fabulous employer partner, Ben Campbell. I'm going to let Todd introduce Ben to talk about his story of being an amazing employer and help offer insight to all of you to achieve successful employer engagement. So, Todd, now I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you for having me, Gina. It's a pleasure to be here. I see a lot of familiar names in this room. Some of you I have not spoken with in quite a while, but it sure is great to see everybody. So, those of you that do not know me, or maybe you're not familiar with Direct Advocacy and Resource Center, specifically Linkages, which is the program that I run. Direct Advocacy and Resource Center is an independent living center. Our overall mission is to help individuals with disabilities lead independent and content lives. We provide transportation, training, occupational and mobility services, assistive technology, cooking and nutrition, financial management, peer-to-peer support. And then I run the employment side of it. And my goal or my job, my role is to reach out to employers and I ask employers if they are actively hiring individuals with disabilities. If they are, fantastic. But more importantly, if they are not, or I get the old deer in the headlights kind of look, I help educate those employers about the largely untapped demographic of extremely qualified job seekers with disabilities. Um, I have found in my experience that really the biggest challenge with employers is they're not familiar with the demographic. There's a lot of fear because unfortunately there are assumptions made about individuals with disabilities. Unfortunately, most of which are have negative connotations. Um, there is such, I'm going to just tell y'all real quick about my daughters. So I do have identical twins with visual disabilities. They were preemies. They were born at 29 weeks gestation. One of my daughters had major medical complications, was in neonatal intensive care for 18 months. And yes, I said 18 months. It was a really rough time for my wife and I. But during that time, her name's Ariel. Ariel coded several times. She had a lot of oxygen deprivation. So, on top of her visual disability, she's also intellectually disabled and she's actually on the spectrum as well. Um, she works at the Beacon Group here in Tucson in a secure, the shredding department there. Her identical twin that has a visual disability is an attorney. So I use my own daughters as an example of the diversity of talents and abilities that folks in this, in our demographic we assist and work for strive to help every single day. That kind of helps open up the conversation. And then I also talk a little bit about, you know, hey, employer, tell me what is your understanding of when you hear the word disability? And oftentimes, and I really apologize if this is offensive to anybody, but this is what I get. Dumb, deaf, blind, or in a wheelchair. And again, I don't think they're trying to be mean. I think there's just a big gap in knowledge. And so, I explain other things. There's hidden disabilities, right? Physical disabilities, whatever the case may be, but there is a very large spectrum. I also talk about, um, cancer, unfortunately, is just running rampant in our world today. And a lot of times, folks, maybe they're taking FMLA, they're on disability, they're fighting the battle. They kick its fanny once they're done with their chemo. They want to, re-enter the workforce. And it's like when I use that example, because that's kind of we've dealt with that in my family as well. they're like, oh, okay. And then, we just kind of open up that dialogue. And then what I do is we've got a really cool success story where I talk a little bit about accommodations. Hey, what do accommodations mean to you? Oh, they can be really expensive, and I don't even know where to start. So I explain, excuse me, guys. Um, so I use an example. We had a young man who was a job seeker, had autism, and he was a savant with computers, or I should say is, I don't know why I'm talking past tense, is a total savant with computers. So there's a very large employer here in town, and they needed a cybersecurity person. So we're like, hey, let's get this guy in front of y'all. They gave him an assessment, aced it, did another, in-person interview, talked about, um, what his strategies would be, what his understanding of the current climate of cyber, crimes going on. And then we started talking about accommodations. And the employer was very concerned. What are we going to need to do? Da, 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 da. Well, all he needed for an accommodation was to be able to wear his hoodie over his head, have the fluorescent lights above him turned off, and have a soft lamp, a soft, like a yellow lamp. I don't even know what you call those. I guess a soft bulb or whatever. And that was it. So it literally costed the employer zero. So, and again, I like to use that story. That's kind of one of my anchor stories about, when I talk to employers about accommodations. And, I help remind them, it's about reasonable accommodations. If it doesn't make business sense, it doesn't make business sense. But a lot of times, those assumptions are made. And so that's kind of like when they hear that disability or whatever the case may be, folks aren't open to it. But I have found we are currently up to, I think it's 175 employer partners, and I represent Pima County, Cochise County, Santa Cruz County, Greenlee County, and Graham County. So we've got a pretty good base in Pima County, of course. We're building it down in Santa Cruz County as well as Cochise County. Graham and Greenlee are pretty small markets, but we are still trying to get a presence out there with some of our, our partner organizations, employment networks, and so forth, and get some movement out there. Um, I'm just going through my brain to see if I'm remembering everything. Another thing that we do, oh, I know what I wanted to talk about. Um, of those 175 employers, I go onto their web page once a week, every single one of their careers pages, and I update what I call my weekly job lead email blast. And basically, what it shows is name of the employer, how many jobs are available, and then there's a summation of what types of jobs are available, the actually titles or generalized, like in the some of the restaurants we say front and back of the house, right? Because it's kind of standard. But like some of the engineering firms we have, we've got some big ones, Oracle, um, TEP, the U of A, there's a lot of like really specific jobs that are out there. So we'll highlight those. And then I have the third component of each employer's description is what I call the good to know section. And the good to know section is like little insider information that the recruiters will usually share with me that I can communicate out to the job developers and job seekers. I just saw a chat come in. When we're wrapped up, I'll reach out to Gina and Gina, if it's okay, maybe we could send you could send me the list of who's on the call and I'll just do a group email blast out to everybody. Okay. Um, so I like to use the American Red Cross as a good example of this good to know information. The recruiter said, listen, if somebody's coming in for an interview, have them go to our webpage and study our values and operating pillars. And if a job seeker can speak to these during the interview, that could really separate them from the pack. So that's just kind of a quick little example of what I try to find about that good to know information that'd be helpful. Or some of the recruiters are really awesome and say, hey, if anybody comes through linkages, make sure they send me an email I applied for this position. This is the rec. Here's my experience, coming through the linkages program. So we really get some good partnerships. And then every week, believe it or not, those 175 employers represent probably about 4,000 active jobs every single week. And it probably reaches, I'd say at least a couple 2,500 end users to include job developers as well as job seekers. So it's been a really fun ride. It's really wonderful. My biggest satisfaction is when I get to an employer where they're fearful and, we can open up dialogue and we make that connection. That's awesome. That's kind of like what I live for. Um, Other things that we do, just so everybody knows, and some of you may be interested, is I have a monthly employment specialist meeting at the third Thursday of every month. During that time, I usually have a featured employer that'll come in and talk about their company, the types of positions that are available, a little bit about company culture, and then we open up for a Q&A session. So that's actually really cool. Also, those of you, working with job seekers, I host every Wednesday a peer-to-peer support group via Zoom from 8:30 to 9:30 every Wednesday morning, and it is intended for job seekers with disabilities to just come in. I don't bring agendas to these meetings. I serve as a bit of an administrator. But I like the participants to drive the content of that meeting. And oftentimes, as it does say in the title, peer-to-peer support, they really get into some really wonderfully engaging conversation. So if any of you would like to join us as a guest just to check it out, again, shoot me an email. Or, if you want to attend and bring a job seeker to check it out, just shoot me an email and I'd be happy to send you an invite. We also host quarterly hiring events. Uh, Good problem to have is our hiring events are just gaining traction and they just continue to grow, continue to grow. So our next one we're going to be doing is going to be in conjunction with the City of Tucson's Housing Authority department, and it's going to be pretty darn big. So we're still working out the details of that, but information will be coming out probably within the next couple weeks. And again, if anybody's interested in receiving the email blast, um, that'll all be a little synopsis of what I send out to the group email. But just reach out to me and I'll help out any way I can. Before we go to the next phase of, actually, Gina, do you want me to hold questions till afterwards, till once Mr. Ben Campbell is complete?
It's whatever you guys are comfortable with. We can do it as we go. We can save it for the end.
All right. Well, real quick, does anybody have any questions for me about what's been shared to this point? You guys are easy on me. Thank you. Kidding. So please add me to your distribution list. Okay, fantastic. So again, Bill, Gina will be sending me a attendance roster of everybody that's been here with contact info. And before close of business today, I will send out my information to everybody. Well, listen, y'all. Mod Pizza. I don't know if y'all eat at Mod Pizza. If you don't, you really need to because they have fantastic pizza. But my wife and I frequent a Mod Pizza very close to us here. And they actually employ a young man that has Downs, and he is awesome. And to see the interaction that goes on in that store, it's just really awesome. And he's a very delightful young man. He works his tail off back there. And so I got to talking to the store manager and I said, wow, this is really cool. He step off to the side. I gave him my card, kind of told him, about what we do. And he was like, yeah, we are very interested. So we had added Mod Pizza to our weekly email blast based off of the conversation I had with the store general manager at that time. And then I was at a hiring event and I met Mr. Ben Campbell, who is the district manager of Mod Pizza. And I just kind of like elbowed myself in and got to meet him. And, explained what happened at the store here in our neighborhood, and asked if he would be interested in attending one of our hiring events. And our last hiring event, he actually had two members from his team, store general managers, join us, and it's just absolutely wonderful. But in talking with Gina, we were thinking about who would be a good employer to bring in that walks the talk, and they're really phenomenal company. And so, with that said, I'm gonna go mute and I'm gonna turn the floor over to Mr. Ben Campbell. And Ben, on behalf of all of us, again, thank you for being here, bud.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate um, the very nice introduction there and all of your time having me here. And what a great gathering of the minds supporting people here. It's been a real big pleasure of mine, personally and also professionally, uh, through the workplace at Mod Pizza, supporting individuals with disabilities, and whether it's physical or developmental disabilities, we've had really great uh, just opportunities created at Mod Pizza. I know that Todd just shared an example of one of our employees at our Houghton Town Center location down in Vale. We have several more. Some are employees that are supported with job coaches. Others are independent and not receiving benefits like that. So there's really a wide array. So I don't have too much prepared other than just being here for each of you guys. I know there's going to be a lot of questions and really good conversation around best practices and really what we can do to support job seekers as well as connect with employers and build those good relationships, finding employment opportunities for people. So I'm an open book with any of that, and I really just wanted to be here and share that it is very possible, right? From an employment side of things, from the employer on the operations side, there is always opportunity to show how valuable an individual with disabilities can be as an employee. I think that's a real holdup for a lot of employers. It's something that Todd and I have discussed. That's what Gina and I were discussing, is really just how we can best connect with employers to make it viable, right? Todd made a good point about how we communicate things like accommodations and what is a reasonable accommodation that a business owner or manager or recruiter and HR manager in an organization might not even consider if they're not aware. The same goes for employment in general, right? If they don't know, then the opportunity isn't there, and it's not a priority for them. So there are a lot of really good tactics to kind of educate employers and also just build those relationships that allow that to be possible. We've worked, Mod Pizza specifically, we've worked in the past with Workability. I know several of you have interacted with UCPSA, with Julie and Vanessa over the years. Some really great relationships have come out of that, and they do amazing work. I just saw a post on social media from them. They were at, I think it was some market yesterday where they were kind of engaging, and they had several of their members working and interacting with the community. And there's just a lot of really good ways to connect and show employers and job seekers that it is possible, because it's really hard. You all know it, supporting individuals with disabilities, supporting members of your groups, and I know there's a really wide array of representation here of how you're supporting individuals or what you're doing in your programs. But at the heart of it all is like connecting with employers, showing that there is a lot of value there and how to best do that. And then also just encouraging job seekers, because that can really, we know it can be very discouraging. It's really hard out there, as if there isn't enough challenges for these individuals. Todd said, a really good point of like all the health issues, cancer running rampant in the world right now, everything that we're working to overcome. as an individual, and then on top of that, not being given a fair chance is really hard. So it's on us to build that bridge. And I've been really fortunate, like I said, at Mod Pizza to work with people like Workability, with Todd, and then just with individuals. You know, I'd say a big part of our company culture is creating that opportunity. I think I just saw a message in the chat, um, which I was not reading. Um, we are a background friendly employer. We're just a second chance employer. There's been a lot of barriers to employment for individuals, and we're really try to create that fair chance and create that opportunity. So I appreciate you letting me share a little bit about what I do, about what we're interested in and what we're seeing, and happy to answer any questions and walk through what we do as an employer, and then also what I do trying to bridge that gap and educate other employers and encourage job seekers.
So before we open the floor, I would like to also do an add-on, and that is number one, individuals with disabilities, they don't want pity. They just want to live fulfilling lives.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I make very clear when I talk to employers is we're not looking for pity here. We're not looking for you to just hire somebody because they have a disability. If somebody walks in and they have a red and white cane, give them the respect to talk to them. You never know what people are capable of until you engage in conversation. So I forgot to add that, and I just wanted to make sure that I share that with everybody. And then I have a question for you, Ben. It's a two-part question. Number one, how did Mod become inclusive out of the gate? And then number two, if I'm a job developer or a job seeker with disabilities, from your
Mhm.
chair, what suggestions would you have for the job developer or job seeker? And
It's a great question. I would say so to answer the first part, which is how did Mod come to this point of being like more focusing on inclusivity and um, wanting to create those second chances or reduce barriers to employment. It really, a lot of it comes with how Mod was founded. It was during the financial crisis in 2008, which is not an ideal time to open, own, or operate a restaurant or really any business. We know that it was a really challenging time for the business, and the goal was, you know, a place where we would want our family to work. That it was a family-owned business operating a few restaurants, and then grew over time, really to have a personal experience. So from like a brand identity sort of deal, it's, you know, a very personal experience, but also from a culture and mission standpoint, really that's who we want working with us. Todd makes a really good point that we're not asking, I'm not here saying, you know, we need to get employers to take pity on people or, you know, to do something out of charity. That's not the intention at all. It's really, that's who we want working with us is talented people, good people who want to give back to the community, who align with our values and our culture. And when you start from that frame of mind as an employer, then you start asking, okay, why would I not hire an individual with disabilities? Why would I not give somebody a second chance who is in the justice system and needs employment to get back on their feet, or um, anybody who needs that chance, right? Mod is the second chance. So that's kind of where it started. Is the culture and mission as a whole, and then really how that evolved to specifically focus on employment. Um, to answer the second part of your question more specifically, about like a job developer, what were you asking more specifically about, like job developers and applicants? What were you looking to see?
so if a job developer wants to approach a business and have one of their job seekers
Yes.
apply for that job, what sort of, other than submitting the application online,
Yes.
what other things might they be able to do to improve their odds and gain some traction in the at least interview process and then go from there?
Oh yes, great question. I'd say a first is engaging in the process as normal, like you said, by putting in that application, by reaching out as any applicant candidate would. There are a lot of businesses out there, right? Speaking beyond just mod, right? Thinking of small businesses or local companies where they don't have, community outreach. It's just oftentimes the hiring manager is HR and runs their department. Like there isn't always a lot of outreach with that. So they're just looking at a resume or they're just looking at a name in a system. So I think a really helpful thing is in two parts. First is engaging with people like Todd, right, where there is that employer and job seeker relationship, right, or job developer and support connected with employers, where each of you, right, Todd said it, he has a large list of 175 employers with hundreds of different job opportunities across Southern Arizona. There's opportunity in there. There is, you know, someone will fit somewhere in there. So I'd say that's the first piece is those relationships of knowing we've been working really hard for this individual. Um, how Todd advocates for people and connects them with employers, with job postings, with someone's individual skills. He spoke about that one individual who had computer skills. I see this all the time. I have a couple job developers that I know that support second chance employees leaving the prison system, and they're really great advocates for their people, and they're calling me up and saying, "Hey, what have you got at this restaurant on this side of town? This person is restricted in these ways, for instance, for parole, um, and needs this." And that goes a long way, right? Because there's a lot on the employer end, right? We're operating a business. We are serving customers. We're cleaning restaurants. We're dealing with bills and property managers and, you know, all the things that come in the normal course of a day. And having that connection really helps. We know, hey, this individual is could be a good fit, and that helps prioritize. So that's the first thing, is leaning into the network, right, where there are great connections to those job postings and employers, because then there already is an established relationship. You're not just taking a shot in the dark. Or again, it can be very discouraging for a job seeker to just be endlessly filling out applications and either not hearing anything, or you go in and the interview doesn't go well. Sort of the second piece of that question, which is about like the interview process or job seeker as well. Um, I would say, understanding there's a lot of variance in the different interviews and employment out there. I've seen it. I interview people for restaurant work. So we're looking for that specific job description, right? There's a lot out there. So really knowing what interview you're walking into can really be helpful when you're supporting a job seeker with the interview process. It's going to look a lot different if you're applying for a restaurant versus something customer service versus something in the educational system, or administrative, kind of like what Todd was talking about with his two daughters, of like how one is an attorney and one, uh, I don't remember what you said your second daughter does, but there's a very big difference in what they're doing with their skills and with their knowledge, putting their abilities to work. So that's really where we come into play, right? Supporting individuals is knowing how to connect them to that like specific interview process. So it's not just like catching them off guard.
That was excellent. Thank you, Ben.
Okay.
I see Jessica's hand is up. Jessica, before we get to you, my friend, I just want to catch up on the chat. Christine says a lot of businesses claim to be background friendly, but create barriers for the job seeker. Thank you for walking the walk. And then Tom asks about accommodations, kind of generally. So, have you had to do any sort of extraordinary things, or have they been relatively simple and easy to implement for you?
It's a great question. I appreciate Tom for saying that, and Todd for bringing it up too in the introduction. Accommodations are super important, and there's again a really wide range of what you may see for an accommodation. Some are very simple, um, like what Todd was saying, like just small environmental changes or small social pieces that may need to be adjusted, and some would need like, you know, myself or our human resources team, like I work for a relatively large organization where we have a lot of support resources for us, like somebody that handles accommodations and leave requests, things like that, making sure everybody is supported. So it really is an individual case by case basis, depending on what that person needs. As Todd and I shared, we have individuals that work with us that have intellectual disabilities, and cannot do the full scope of the job description, but they are still contribute very valuably, right? I'm sure we all know people that may be limited in what they can accomplish, but we're not letting the limitation define us. We're really focusing on what work can be done and how can we, make this work. Occasionally, it does not work out, right? For the individual, it's not the best fit for them. For Mod Pizza specifically, right? That's where someone like Todd comes in, or like I was saying, with what I would recommend to each of you as job developers and supporting individuals in that process is finding that right use of their skills. That would be a comfortable environment, because sometimes, if we don't have the ability for, whether it's customer service or cash handling and counting money, full mobilities, sometimes there are limitations that people don't want to work in a restaurant for, or it's not the right fit for them personally. It really is a case by case basis. We also have several individuals that I work with that have different physical limitations. I work with an individual that only has one arm, and he's still able to do all the things that he needs to do. His is a little bit restricted because he can't do some things that an individual with a second hand can do, but he's still in there making pizzas, serving customers, doing janitorial work, all of it. There's just some slight restrictions. So it really, I would say, Mod Pizza specifically is good with accommodations. There are a lot of really great employers out there that are, and also are legally required to make reasonable accommodations to employees and be compliant with the ADA. But it's hard to get there if you don't have the right relationship, if we don't hire them with the intent of like wanting to make it work.
Beautiful. Thank you. Jessica, and for those of you who don't know, I'm so lucky to work with Jessica. She's our Employment First Program Manager at the Sonoran Center. So, little intro.
Thanks, Gina. I have in my former career, I used to do a lot of job development myself. And one of the things that I always felt like I wanted to know more about was I think we all have, as job developers, our approaches with employers, and we kind of
Mm-hmm.
feel it out as we go, whether or not they are um, interested in hearing more as you talk and trying to figure it out. What would you say and maybe you've had an experience in the past where there was a really good job developer interaction or employment specialist interaction where you would say that's the approach, like that works best. What's the approach that you think a company or an employer would be more open to as a job developer?
Yeah. I know what got me. I mean, I had told Gina some of my story. I had done some work myself, when I was going to the U of A. I was kind of adjacent to this world. And then also both of my parents are in education. My dad is in special education, and then he was working for the state and departed. That was not for him, and decided to open and operate his own business. And then my mom was a she's an early childhood educator. So I've seen this from all sorts of angles, and it has really given me a lot of insight into that, which made it a lot easier for me to hear that message, right? I didn't need a lot of tactics. I didn't need a special approach. It's just like, hey, this is a cool thing we can do. Not all employers have that same mindset. So I would come back to two things that I think are really valuable approaches for job developers reaching out to a company or any employment opportunities. First, I would use Workability as an example. They are a great organization here in Southern Arizona. The support they give to their members is second to none. The job coaching is very helpful. I've never had a bad experience with their job coaches, which is definitely a tough relationship, right? Especially in like a limited space or an active like operating restaurant, for example. Having not just the supported employee, but also a job coach there can really be challenging. And again, for a lot of employers, they might feel like it's a hindrance. So I would say that's a really good example. What they do that sets them apart is being mindful of each specific need. Like everything's different, right? I support 9 different restaurants, and each one of them has a different layout or something different about them. At the very minimum, it's a different group of people and customers. So there's different needs. And what they do with job coaching and employment placement is, again, saying, hey, this is how it adds value to your specific case, right? And that doesn't just go for differences between restaurants, that goes for different employers too. So I would say that's the first piece that I was going to say is knowing your audience and tailoring it to fit that individual need, the individual job seeker, and where they're working or looking to work. That's kind of what set Workability apart. It made it a really good partnership for Mod Pizza, is that. And then second, I would say, in terms of approaches with any employer, small businesses, a large organization, it's a little bit, I guess, self-centered, but like not everybody feels the same way that we do, right? Or they don't have the same knowledge that we do. And we have to present it as what is benefiting them, even if that's not the best, right? We're not doing it. We're here in this business to support people. Sometimes that's what the employer needs to hear as well, is, hey, this is how it adds value. It isn't charity. It's not adding extra work to you. It shouldn't be, like, an employer rolls their eyes and like, oh, okay, I'll deal with this. It's helpful. So we got to sell the person on what they're getting from the employee as well, right? How it adds value to them. So the first piece I would say is tailoring to that individual circumstance and need. And second is, thinking from the employer side, hiring an individual with a lot going on in their day. They're looking to add a member to their team, whatever that work may be. How is it helping them? Making it their priority to want this person. It's kind of just some classic salesmanship there. We are selling the value of this employment relationship to a hiring manager, and that can help connect, especially when there isn't the relationship in place, right? Because it's a lot more than me and the 170 people that Todd is connected with. There's a lot of opportunities out there that is untapped because it's just not there. And as we go about building those relationships, sometimes you just gotta build that bridge and sell the value to that person.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. I would definitely agree that any kind of business You have to promote the value. And I think all of our folks have a lot of value. So I appreciate your response and your willingness to look into that and see that.
Of course.
And I have a question. I have a whole bunch of them, but I also want to invite all of you attendees to today's session. Feel free to put questions in the chat, raise your hand, and unmute. We want to answer your questions too while we're here. But while we wait for folks to think of them, Ben, one thing I know that a lot of us would say we've seen is an individual gets a job, things are great, and then a manager in a facility changes, and maybe that
Right.
new manager doesn't understand the value that that employee is bringing. And I don't know, is that something you've seen and within your stores, and what's kind of your strategy to ensure that new manager wants to see success as well?
Yeah, I'd say at minimum, it can be really hard for the employee as well, for the job seeker as well. I can think even me personally, I have a little anecdote on that. I had an employee that was working for me when I was a restaurant manager. And when I took on some new roles, at the very minimum, it's a big routine change, right? It's different faces, different people. So we just got to be mindful of how we present it, right? Because even if it's a great person that does feel the same way, for the supported employee, sometimes it's just transition is hard. It really just, again, depends on the individual and what the circumstance is. But in the specific case, I have seen sometimes where like management or supervisors change and are not, they don't have that same mindset. And especially when an employee is already in place and is being supported, sometimes we just have to be reminded that, we're all people. You know what I mean? Here we are, we're all in this together from a team culture point of view. It's much more constructive to build that relationship and to open our minds to that. And, kind of like if I were leading a manager or one of my restaurant managers was new and had that, really just encouraging them, hey, this person is, they're with us. This is a mod squad member. This is an employee with us already, and we have to support them. Whether that's with some accommodations that are approved and in place, or with individual social needs. It's really just a matter of coaching and leadership of that individual. From the employee side, right? If there is a supported employee, I would just encourage them to, it's hard. Change is always hard. But to keep an open mind and to work to build a new relationship, because it's, there is going to be management changes or employment changes or new team members added, peers around them. So I would just say that's where all of you come in, the supporting employees through whatever that unique situation looks like. Or if it's a manager, there's always somebody else that can set them straight and try to build that relationship in a positive way.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that it's a very common thing. So it's good to have some proactive strategies to set people up for success. And I see a question in the chat. As a busy GM, what's the best way to connect with hiring staff? Those hiring managers or HR folks.
Yeah, I would say a job seeker can always reach out to that individual restaurant, right? Our hiring managers, GMs have days off too. They have days where they're shorthanded, and it can be tough, right? From a restaurant operator perspective, like if we're a little shorthanded, to then also like be off the floor interviewing and responding to employment questions when we're already, it's catch 22. We'd love to interview and hire to fill that gap, but there's a gap and we're in there working. So that's really a challenge for the operator to work through. So I would say if the application or normal interview process is going a little slowly, it's always worthwhile to reach out to the business directly, right? Because say, even outside of, just restaurant GM world, any business, people would take time off. People are out of the office. I was reaching out to a vendor, and he was traveling for a conference, so I got directed to one of his peers that was covering. And if I had just been frustrated that I'm not getting a reply from this guy, and went on my day frustrated, it's not helping me. It's the same with the hiring. Is there are a lot of applicants, there are a lot going on in their day. So sometimes just that gentle reminder, or reaching out to the business directly. Maybe somebody's covering, maybe there's multiple people and not just the manager that are hiring, like a supervisor or an assistant manager. There's actually a lot of options out there. So I would say kind of contacting the business generally, or an individual location might get more traction than just relying on one person for follow-up.
That's good advice. Thank you. And I got to tell you, Ben, this is normally a chattier group. They're quiet today, but that's okay because we still have more questions for you. I'm going to ask, probably because it's selfish to my role, what do inclusive employers need from us in order to maintain success? Like, we're the human services folks. What can we come in and do to support you in being an inclusive employer?
Great question. Honestly, I've seen the same thing. We talked about manager switches and stuff. I've seen the same thing with job coaches and human services, like support staff switching. So on that side, sometimes like it has made it challenging for, me to know what does the support team for this individual look like. And usually for me, it's just talking to the person. But when there's a family member involved, a job coach involved, state benefits are involved, so they want the coach in there. They need the notes, they need the job assessments. Like, it's not just like I can just have a conversation sometimes. And we need some more supporting information. I'd say the main thing is communication of what that individual needs, keeping track. If again, I mean, the reverse of what I was talking about with the business, where if you're off, tell them you're off, so that they know what the plan is for supporting the employee. Right? If you're if you're supporting someone that's actively working, what's the plan? How are we supporting them? If you're supporting someone through the job interview process, keeping notes and understanding, hey, I had this interview with this person, and handing those notes off can be really helpful. So I'd say communication is really important. The flip
Awesome.
side of the like manager interviewing side is just like sometimes on the support and human services side, you're not doing it 100% of your day. There's going to be some, friction there, and the communication is helpful working through it.
Awesome. Thank you. I see another question. It says, Ben, are your stores franchises or corporate owned? I ask this as sometimes a franchise owner may have a different approach than a corporate owned store.
I am on the corporate side of things. I have also worked on the franchised and licensed side. I've opened restaurants for both. I've trained teams at both, in different sense. It is different. It definitely is an approach. So that's the main thing. That's kind of why my advice, whether it's restaurants or not, mod or not, corporate or franchise, kind of falls under that same thing, where it's reaching out to the business directly, and understanding them as an employer is different than a large organization that has an HR department, that has an accommodations and leave department, that has a couple layers of managers. Oftentimes a franchised group is much more lean. You know what I mean? It's the manager and an operator oftentimes, and that's it. They don't have an HR person. A lot of their things are third party, like that support them, like payroll, for instance, or HR. So franchise owners often do have different approaches. I would say there are several franchise groups, just as an example, here in Southern Arizona. Arby's is a really good employer that's franchised here locally, as is McDonald's. There are franchise groups that own and operate those businesses. And then there's some like Mod that are corporate, but it really just comes back to that individual um, job seeker and then reaching out to the business.
Excellent. Oh, you're so good, Ben. One more question from the chat, and then I'm gonna say we'll have to stop with questions because we're almost at time. Um, And this says, hi, coming from a school district standpoint, several of our schools like to go on field trips in our community. And Casey is from Yuma. They face roadblocks and usually can only go to a food bank or a library. Do you have any ideas on how school districts can strengthen the relationship with business communities to allow for some of those field trips through local businesses and letting the students see what work opportunities exist?
Yeah, I would highly encourage them to reach out to the businesses. Same thing. Mod has done several of these, and I'll come back again to Workability, who's been a great partner for us, where they have um, several individuals that work with local schools. Like, so in TUSD, we have several employment relationships, as well as like, I mean, it's job development. It's kind of workforce entry. You may not have those programs or have those relationships in every school district, but all it took was them reaching out and saying, hey, can I have this many people come and observe, or can you give us a tour, or whatever the intention is of a field trip or visits or workforce entry. I would just be reaching out and I would communicate, because um, there are a lot of employers out there. There are a lot of different businesses in different fields. Sometimes they're just waiting to be asked.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna close this out. Ben, Todd, I don't know how to thank you. You guys, I think, have offered a lot of great practical strategies for folks that hopefully folks can start using in their own employer engagement strategies. And I just appreciate your time and all you've offered us so much. Friends, next month, our session, Employment First Topics and Tactics, will be on November 10th. In honor of Veterans Day, we're going to connect with a veterans disability employment or a veterans employment services provider, because there's a big intersection in the work that we do. And we're going to learn a little bit from their approaches. So thank you all for your time this morning, and we'll see you next month. Have a great week and celebrate Endim.